Hi, it's Mitch from PickDawgz.com, and it is Sunday, June 16th, 2024. Here with your first 5 inning picks for today. We've got no first halves going on today, so it's all going to be first 5 innings. We've got 16 Major League Baseball games with yesterday's rain out, so we're going to cover each and every one of those. And of course, we also covered today in sports history. Today in 2015, it was the Golden State Warriors winning their first NBA championship in 40 years, their fourth in franchise history. It was the beginning of the run of those great Golden State Warrior teams. So that was 2015. Of course, in 2024 today, we're going to crush the book. So let's just get right into it and get started. For our first game of the day, we head to Chicago, where the Chicago Cubs are hosting the St. Louis Cardinals. Jameson Taillon on the mound for the Cubbies, while it's Miles Mikolas on the mound for the Cards. Mikolas has been a Cubs killer, with the Cards going 8-3 in his last 11 starts versus the Chicago Cubs. Jameson Taillon, a guy who, for his statistics, always seems to be on the right side of things. It's just the way he's been throughout his career. But generally in the second half of the season, or after he builds up those positive stats, with it come some negative stats. And I do believe that those are on the way. We look at the way these teams are hitting the baseball, and especially versus right-handed pitching, which is what they face today. The Cubbies at 221 versus righties, while the Cards at 240. Over the last 10 games, it's the Cards at 231 and the Cubs at 226. Like I said earlier in this video, I don't think that Taillon really represents the numbers that he has. And Mikolas, well, he just rises to the occasion when he sees those Cubs. I'm going to take the Cardinals first 5 as my pick for this game. For our next game, we head to Baltimore, where the Orioles are hosting the Phillies. We got a gigantic pitching matchup in this one. 2 of the best in the game. Zach Wheeler going for the Phillies. It's Corbin Burnes on the mound for the Orioles. You hear these numbers, boy, you can tell 2 of the best in the game, with Wheeler with a 2.16 ERA over his last 3 starts, and Burnes at 2.08. And if that isn't good enough for you, look at their last 3 starts, where Burnes has a 0.43 ERA and Wheeler at 0.90. These guys do not give up much, and I don't expect them to give up much in this one. Instead of taking the easy under, let's just dig under a little bit here and look at the way these teams are hitting righties. And the Orioles hitting 270 over their last 10 games versus right-handed pitching, while the Phillies check in at 238. For the season, the Phillies have actually been slightly better versus righties than the Orioles at 245 versus 242. But one thing we know about Zach Wheeler, when it comes to these big matchups, he tends to be the guy that makes the mistake. I'm going to take the Orioles in the first 5 of this one. For our next game, we head to Atlanta, where the Braves are hosting the Rays. It's been all Braves in this series, as they have pretty much gotten to the Rays, who have gotten the lead in each of the first 2 games of the series and have been unable to hold it. Hurston Waldrep gets the ball here for the Braves in this one, up against Zach Eflin for the Rays. Waldrep does have that big ERA, 17.18, but you have to remember that is on very limited work, while Eflin comes in 4.06 ERA and 4.60 over his last 3 starts. These teams, we've seen the Rays play better baseball than this, but just the Braves just seem to be frustrated and really taking it out on the Rays. When we look at the way these teams are hitting right-handed pitching, neither of them over the last 10 games are really hitting righties, with the Rays at 180 and the Braves at 198. And really for the season, 239 for the Braves versus 222 for the Rays. It seems like a good chance to say, well, maybe the Rays will avoid the sweep, but I'll tell you, after what I've seen the last 2 days, I'm jumping on the Braves, and that's going to be my pick. For our next game, we head to Washington, where the Nationals are taking on the Miami Marlins. It's Mitchell Parker on the bump for the Nats, with Jesus Luzardo getting the ball here for the Marlins. Luzardo has been pretty strong at times this season. He started the season slow, started to come on a little bit, and then when he's played against a few teams, he's been roughed up lately. And when we look at his numbers, certainly reflects that. And Parker, kind of a big surprise here for the Nationals. He gives up about 3 runs almost every time he makes it to the mound, but he seems to get positive results at it. more often than not, but over his last 3 starts, it hasn't really gone that way. We look at, for the season, Luzardo's ERA is at 5.11, while Parker checks in at 3.21, while Luzardo was roughed up by the Tampa Bay Rays, who were crushing lefties at the time, and ballooned his ERA over his last 3 starts to 7.88, while Parker 2.60. He's actually gotten better. Neither of these teams hitting lefties particularly well recently, with the Marlins at 198 and the Nationals at 225. It's a tough one for me, but I tell you, I think I'm going to roll with the Nationals, who are 15-4 in the last 19 as favorites. For our next game, we head to Toronto, where the Blue Jays are hosting the Cleveland Guardians. Jose Barrios getting the ball here for the Blue Jays, while Ben Lively is on the mound for the Guardians. Lively, certainly a really big story this season. His ERA checking in at about half of what it was a year ago. He's at 2.59 for the season, and Barrios at 2.93. Of course, he was cast off by the Twins, and, he's really found a home here in Toronto. While the Blue Jays don't always play that well, Barrios certainly has. The thing is about Lively, we keep looking for him to regress back to his old self, but he's actually still going in the other direction. With that 2.59 on the season, he's 2.04 over his last 3 starts. We look at Barrios, 2.93 for the season and 2.89 over his last 3 starts. These teams hitting righties, it's the Guardians at 259 over the last 10, while the Blue Jays at 226. For the season, the Guardians slightly better, 233 to 230. I think the Guardians are slightly better here. I'll take them in the first 5. For our next game, we head to New York, where the Mets are hosting the Padres. The Padres looking to avoid the sweep, as they've really not hit the baseball here in New York. It's Dylan Cease on the bump for the Padres, Tyler McGill on the mound for the Mets. McGill has been pretty decent in his limited action that we've seen him, coming in with a 3.51 ERA. Cease with a 3.36 ERA and 3.63 over his last 3 starts. But even so, with those numbers, Cease has looked very un-Cease-like, getting hit, definitely at a more rapid rate than we're accustomed to see him being hit. The Padres, are hitting righties over their last 10 games at 270, but it certainly hasn't looked like it in this series. Meanwhile, the Mets just at 226, and, for the season, the Padres crushing righties at 221 to 232 for the Mets. The Mets have thrown a lot of lefties here at the Padres, knowing how well that they hit righties, but I think in this one, I think the Padres salvage one here in New York. I'm going to take them here to get started right in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Houston, where the Astros are hosting the Detroit Tigers. Of course, Verlander scratched yesterday, so Arrighetti went yesterday instead of him. So the Astros have yet to name a starter at the time of shooting this video. We're still going to roll with it. The Tigers still have always struggled in Houston, 5-13 straight up in their last 13 games overall. The Tigers are going with Kenta Maeda here. He's got a 5.89 ERA for the season, 6.23 over his last 3 starts. So he's been hit, and we know that Maeda is a guy that does not really have big top-end speed. He's more of a location guy, and when he's missing his locations, that's when the problems start for him, and that's the way the season's gone. Well, the Astros certainly haven't been world beaters this season. Their batting average certainly suggests that they have what it takes to do that. Hitting 257 versus right-handed pitching, and hitting 257 overall as a team this season, hitting 264 as a team over their last 10 games, and hitting 263 versus right-handed pitching. I think the Astros, after yesterday's embarrassment, make it right and beat the Tigers today and get the first 5. For our next game, we head to Minnesota for game 1 of their doubleheader, as it is the same as yesterday's matchup, where Bailey Ober takes on J.P. Sears. Ober has been roughed up this season, something fierce. He is a 5.13 ERA on the season, 7.98 over his last 3 starts. So, Ober he started the season, he got hit really hard in his first game. Then he kind of leveled off and he pitched really well. And then after that, as of late, he's been getting hit hard again. JP Sears, he plays on a bad team, and sometimes that must wear on you. But, Sears, his 4.02 ERA on the season, and he's got a 4.50 over his last 3 games. So not overly impressive there either. The Twins crushing lefties over their last 10 games at 338. They're at 265 for the season versus lefties, while the A's 216 versus righties and just 182 over their last 10 games. I don't know if the A's just continue to lose, and Bailey Ober certainly can remedy some rough hitting, but tough to go against the Twins here. I'll take them in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Milwaukee where the Brewers are taking on the Cincinnati Reds. It's Colin Ray on the mound for the Reds and Frankie Montas on the mound for the Brewers. Montas checks in with a 4.55 ERA for this Reds team, 4.40 over his last three starts. While Ray certainly seen as a step down in the Brewers rotation, but he hasn't pitched that poorly with a 3.31 ERA on the season, 3.78 over his last three starts. The Brewers in these Sunday games have been very tough, but as of late, really not hitting all that well, but still 242 versus righties over their last three starts, while over the last 10 games, while the Reds hitting 231 versus righties. But for the season, the Brewers are crushing right-handed pitching to the tune of 260, while the Reds at 220. The Reds have not played overall very well in Milwaukee, going just 3-7 in their last 10 trips there, and just 12-31 in their last 43 games against the Brewers. I'm going to take the Brewers in the first 5 this game. For our next game, we head to Colorado where the Rockies are taking on the Pirates. It's Dakota Hudson on the ball for the Rockies, and the Pirates yet to name a starter. A lot of these times where they haven't named a starter, it's ended up being Paul Skeens named late, but we know that Skeens is going tomorrow, so it won't be him. So it'll be interesting to see what the Pirates do. As the time of shooting, of course, the Pirates haven't named that starter yet. Dakota Hudson has a 4.87 ERA on the season, but just 3.00 over his last three starts. We look at how these teams are hitting the baseball. The Rockies at 252 versus righties and 351 over lefties over their last 10 games. So while the Pirates haven't named a starter, let's just say they're crushing it from both sides. Meanwhile, the Pirates hitting lefties at 275 over their last 10 and 220 and 230 though against right-handed pitching. So significantly better against lefties than righties, and that was kind of the point of me saying that in the first place. This is a tough one, because the Rockies have unleashed a lot of runs on the Pirates on Saturday. Tough to repeat that, but I think they get the win. I'm going to take the Rockies in the first 5. For our next game, we go to San Francisco, where the Giants are hosting the Angels. It's been a horrific series so far for the Giants, losing both games to the Angels in a series that they really needed these wins to climb back into the race. The Angels going with Ben Joyce in this one. He's got a 12.27 ERA. He's only pitched 3 and 2/3 innings all season long. He's pitched only in relief. Meanwhile, Kyle Harrison gets the ball here for the Giants, and they need one in a big way. He checks in with a 3.96 ERA on the season, 4.15 though over his last three starts. But the Angels hitting just 219 versus left-handed pitching over their last 10 games, but for the season, a very strong 265. While the Giants against right-handed pitching over their last 10 games, a paltry 197, but 236 for the course of the season. One of the hardest things to do is to finish off a team for a sweep on the road. I just don't think the Angels have that type of team. I'm going to take the Giants in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Seattle, where the Mariners are taking on the Texas Rangers. Dane Dunning on the mound for the Rangers, Logan Gilbert on the mound for the Mariners. Gilbert's a guy that I expected to have a regression last season, and it never happened. I'm still kind of waiting for it to happen this year. Not really seeing it, but he is pitching pretty decently with a 3.19 ERA, 3.66 over his last three starts. So slight regression there, but really nothing to note. But meanwhile, Dane Dunning is similar problems that he's had throughout his career. 4.80 ERA on the season and 5.93 over his last three starts. The Rangers still banged up and hitting righties at just a paltry 209 while the Mariners over their last 10 games, while the Mariners at 251 versus righties over their last 10 games. For the season, the Rangers are hitting 237 versus righties versus 224 for the Mariners. But earlier this season, the Rangers were hitting like 3 and change against righties. So this number has been done nothing but continue to go down. There's no way I can put my money on Dunning on the road. I'm going to take the Mariners in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Arizona, where the Diamondbacks are taking on the White Sox. Jordan Montgomery on the mound for the Diamondbacks, and it's Drew Thorpe on the mound for the White Sox. Thorpe making his second start of his major league career. This guy, we not as heralded as guys like Paul Skeens, but when you look at it, this guy's been involved in 2 of the biggest trades of the last several years. In the trade that brought Soto to the Yankees, and then the trade that brought Dylan Cease over to the San Diego Padres. So even though it's his second major league start, he is certainly a guy that's very highly regarded, being a key player in both of those trades. He's pitched just 5 innings. He's got a 1.80 ERA, so he was not lit up in his first start. Meanwhile, Jordan Montgomery looks to be at the end of his rope. 6.58 ERA on the season, 13.11 over his last 3 starts. It hasn't been pretty, and I'll tell you, I don't think it gets any better here. I know the Diamondbacks are the far better hitting team versus righties, but the White Sox hitting 294 versus lefties over their last 10 games. I'm going to roll with the White Sox in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Los Angeles, where the Dodgers are taking on the Royals. It was all Royals on Saturday, beating the Dodgers 7-2, and the Dodgers hope to bounce back in this one as they send Tyler Glasnow to the mound up against Brady Singer. Both these pitchers' numbers are regressing in a hurry, and Glasnow, while he's seen as a top-flight pitcher, his numbers throughout his career do not reflect that. They reflect that he has an ERA around the mid-4s, so he is certainly gravitating towards that number. 3.24 ERA over his last 3 starts and 3.79 over his last 3, 3.24 for the season. While Singer also going in the wrong direction at 3.30 over his for the season and 5.65 over his last 3 starts. The Dodgers not really hitting all that well. 246 versus righties versus 241 versus righties for the Royals, so very little edge there. And for the season, same thing. It's basically splitting hairs for these teams. So when you see 2 teams that are virtually even, you take the bullpen out of the equation. All the value here is on the Royals, and they're my pick in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Boston, where the Red Sox are hosting the New York Yankees. Of course, this rivalry living on in a big way in this series as Boston getting the win on Saturday, 8-4. Criswell beating Carlos Rodon in that game, not something that not many people at least expected. Today it's Marcus Stroman on the mound for the Yankees up against Cutter Crawford for the Red Sox. Stroman's been decent, 2.82 ERA for the season, 3.06 over his last 3 starts, while Crawford checks in at 3.47 and 5.50 over his last 3 starts. And we look at the way these teams are hitting right-handed pitching, it's actually the Red Sox hitting righties at 284 over their last 10 games, while the Yankees at just 230, even though the Yankees have really amassed a lot of wins over that span. For the season, the Yankees hitting righties at 254 to 246 for the Red Sox. To me, I think that you throw in, the way the Yankees situationally hit, and then you throw Stroman versus Crawford. I'm just going to go with the Yankees in the first 5, even though I don't necessarily love it. For our final game of today's card, we go to Minnesota for Game 2 of their doubleheader, as it is Joey Estes on the mound for the A's and Chris Paddock on the mound for the Twins. Estes, 4.78 ERA on the season, but that checks all the way down to a 2.20 over his last 3 starts, while Paddock at 4.79 on the season, up to 6.19 over his last 3 starts. This is the doubleheader game after the rainout on Saturday, so a late start. Normally we only get that one Major League Baseball game at night, so it's bonus for all of us. We look at the way these teams are hitting righties, and it's 284 for the Twins over their last 10 versus just 182 for the A's. But over the course of the season, the Twins are really only hitting righties at 227, while the A's at 216. This is one of those things where it's like, I don't think the Twins are good enough to continue to roll, even though they've been streaky good. I just think that the A's, this is probably a good opportunity to jump on them. I'll take them in the first 5 to get to Paddock. That wraps up today's first 5 innings picks. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow as we have Game 5 of the NBA Finals, as well as a smaller card of Major League Baseball games. Of course, if you're looking for my best bets, the games I'm betting today, as well as best bets from the world's best handicappers, you can find that over at our website, PickDawgz.com. You can find it underneath the Premium Picks tab. You can use the discount code PICK for 15% off. I also have a link in the description to get our premium picks. I also have a link in the description to get the PickDawgz merch. This zip-up hoodie that I'm wearing, I wore it on the plane ride here to Vegas. Of course, this hat that I'm wearing, and I'll be wearing that as the guy like I normally do. So check them all out at the website. I also put a link in the description for that. Anyways, this is Mitch. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys tomorrow with more first 5s and that NBA first half as well. Let's crush the books today.